quite a bit. Oh dear. It's on now. All right, the topic of this workshop is steps 1 through 3. And I guess first, who wants to go first? Okay. First, I introduce to you guys Sarah.
I'm Sarah Maddox.
What's up, Sarah?
I'm grateful to be here. Not just at GRCNA, this convention and this workshop, but here in this process of recovery. More than I could ever express in my words, right? So the way that I live today is my expression of gratitude. So I'll probably cry. I just feel it coming on this weekend, which I'm cool with today. My clean date is June 28th, 2014.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I was 24 when I got clean. And man, there's just been so much good stuff that I've heard this weekend. And I think that a lot of times it's me being in a place of being open-minded and willing to hear the message, right? Because when I can be in that place, it doesn't matter if I'm in my area in the same damn meeting I'm in every week, right, with the same people speaking. But when I can remove like my judgments and my assumptions and my old ideas and beliefs, right, and be open and willing to hear something new, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
This process is really, really, it's a gift, right? So just a little message for myself, really, because it's all about me, right? A little reminder is, my intention is not to like be funny or charming or inspiring or like make you laugh or cry or whatever, right? I just want to be authentic and be honest with where I'm at today. So what I've been doing lately is actually reworking the steps, which is really funny. My higher power is like, my higher power knows like how important it is to like visually align what's going on in my life, right? Literally align stuff up where it's like I got to this place of being tired of how I was, right? And just in that place of like the pain of remaining the same was greater than the pain it was going to take to change, or the discomfort it was going to take for me to change. And that's where the steps come in for me today, right? So I just was tired of myself, and I was like, man, I haven't worked steps in a while. Like, let's rework the steps, And then I got a follow-up, to speak about like what the topics were, and 1, 2, and 3 was presented, and I was like, well, shit. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's really cool, this process, right? So I'm in this place where I'm about to turn 30 this year, and I was kind of going into it like all cocky and like, oh, I'm feeling so good, and like, in my 30s and all this shit, and but that's me moving along in this place of like, oh, I'm doing good, I got all this, basing off of old ideas and old beliefs, and just kind of going with what I'm going and trying to move forward with, assuming that like I know some shit at this point, which is funny because I do and I don't, right? I'm constantly like, what I'm choosing today, I should say, is that I'm rechecking what I thought I knew. And, so 1, 2, and 3 being like the foundation, right? you know, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, right? It's like I was fortunate enough to come into this process and be open-minded and willing to try a new way to live. And the people in my area, I come from a small area, Tallahassee, and there's some really fucking good recovery there. And you know, I got into the thick of like, I hung around people who had what I wanted, who were something I can't explain, you know, like my sponsor. Ooh, talk about my sponsor, I'll just cry right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
My sponsor has this energy that I can't explain, man. I can't explain. And like, my mom is also an angel, right? Like, I have a really loving family. So I know what, you know, true love, right? Unconditional love is like, but it's just different, you know? Someone who like didn't raise me, but still just loves me, right? Wants nothing but the best for me. That's what I found coming into Narcotics Anonymous, was people who didn't know me and just wanted, you know, to give me what they found. And oh man, that's so beautiful. But I forgot where I was going. I was still talking about my sponsor. But just laying a foundation, right? I came into the rooms and, you know, I was willing to live differently. I was so tired of how I was living, how I was feeling, right? I was willing to change everything. I was willing to do what y'all told me, maybe not at the rate of, I don't know, whatever rate that I thought I thought I had to work the steps in X amount of time, you know, but I got into service. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. I went to 2 meetings a day for a while, you know. I got a sponsor and I started working steps, and you know, step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction and our lives had become unmanageable. So surrender, honesty, and acceptance are big spiritual principles with that, right? And what's so cool about the steps is like, I don't get honest in step 1 and then I don't use honesty the rest of the steps, right? I don't surrender in step 1 and then I'm like, okay, I don't surrender anymore. What I'm finding, you know, going back through the steps is the more that I go in this process, the deeper that I get, right? Because I was living surface level for so long and I didn't know that I craved the depth that I do today, right? That's what Narcotics Anonymous gives me, is depth to my experience. You know, I'm going beyond what just see on the surface, right? And people who loved me and knew me the most didn't know how to help me, right? My parents didn't know how to help me. Doctors didn't know how to help me with the disease of addiction, right? Because there's the mental health piece that they can try to help me with and all that, but with my addiction, Narcotics Anonymous is what helped me. And continues to change my life, right? Because of the work that I put in. And so, you know, going back through, it's like, yeah, I laid a strong foundation, right, of working the steps, and now I'm kind of going back, right, and saying, okay, what works for me and what doesn't, what cracks do I need to fill, what's strong, what's not. You know, when we surrender, we know in our hearts that we've had enough. We're tired of fighting. A relief comes over us and we finally realize that the struggle is over. And a lot of this comes from this It Works How in My book, which I love. We got some good ass literature in this program, it's crazy. And, you know, I'll find myself, especially lately, I've found myself where I don't realize that I'm resisting and I don't realize that I'm holding on so tightly, you know, going through this process. I'm like, oh, I know what surrender is like. Not today. Right? I knew what surrender was like 5.5 years ago, or I knew what surrender was like 4 years ago, right? But as I go and I grow and change, like, things look differently, right? Honesty today looks differently for me than it did when I first came in this process. When I first came around, honesty was like, just fucking be honest, right? Like, quit lying all the time. Like, I can be honest about where I'm going and who I'm with and what I'm doing and how I'm feeling and like, just all, because everything was off, right? Yeah. And now honesty for me is being honest about exactly where I'm at, being honest about how I feel with X amount of time thinking I should feel differently, or I can't share this, or I can't show myself in this way. And it's just a lie that, is really deep rooted in my mind. When I tell myself like I'm not good enough, or just I'm not enough, right? I'm not enough for this job, for this person, for myself, for whatever. We realize that we can no longer go on as we have been. We are ready for a change. And for me, I have to be in that place of like, I don't know what else to do. I surrender. Like I give up. I'm trying to do it myself. And I've experienced the gifts of working the jobs. I've experienced relief, because that's all I ever wanted, right? Was relief from how I was feeling. Mm-hmm. And I find that through working the steps. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, and willingness and trust and hope and faith. Being willing to just be open to the idea that, right, something other than me could help myself. And I just love how unique I get to make this process, right? Like my higher power is my own understanding, my own weird ass understanding of I can call it whatever I want. It can be the universe, it can be the moon, it can be anything that's just greater than me. And it says after we take a few small steps towards belief and trust and see results, we become willing to take bigger steps. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We sometimes encounter remarkable coincidences in our lives that have no rational explanation. We don't need to explain or analyze these occurrences. We can simply accept that they happen and be grateful for them. Mm-hmm. That's my life. It's crazy. I mean, that's just my life. I mean, it's we met some addicts yesterday that were like, oh, we're from this area. Oh, we got a friend that lives out there. Oh, and then we go out to dinner, and then I'm like, yeah, my family lives in Buffalo. Oh, she's from Buffalo. Just the connections of just shrinking down to we're all so connected, right? I'm so connected to everyone in ways that I didn't know was there before, right? I was so closed off from the world, and I used to think I was so open-minded and in the flow of life and just all this shit. And I was so closed off, it was crazy. And I can still get that way, right? I can still be closed off from other people if I don't remain diligent in this process, because I used to just think that being open-minded and being loving and all that shit was it just kind of came. I didn't have to work for it. It was just it just happened, right? And it doesn't just happen, right? For me to be loving and kind requires work. Yeah. And some days it's easy when I'm real spiritually fit and just really on my shit. Some days it's easier than others, right? Because if it was a struggle, climbing out of a hole every single day, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's because that's how it was before. I don't think I could stay around, right, if it was like that. And it's not, right? Some days it's harder than others. But I get what I put out. I get out of it what I put in. We trust that we are undergoing a fundamental transformation, even though we may not understand its full implication for our lives. I trust the process today. I do. I'm not talking about yesterday or tomorrow. I'm just talking about today. I really, recently I got into this place where I was like, oh, I'm so connected to my higher power, right? Which now I'm kind of going to like step 3, but I'm so connected to my higher power. I'm getting all these signs of like, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen by this date, and this. And God was like, oh, really? Oh, weird, because like you haven't been like meditating really, so you haven't been listening, you've just been praying a lot. So like we're not really that connected right now, right? Like we're, like you thought you were feeling me, but you're not really feeling me. And that's okay. Sometimes I get it wrong. And I heard, early on it was like, if I'm not growing, I'm decaying, right? Like if I'm not, it's like I'm a plant, right? If I'm not growing, like I'm just fucking rotting away, right? Growing is painful. As somebody that went through a lifetime of growth spurts, like I feel like growing pains was just a constant, right? And I forget that, right? I forget that there's like this uncomfortable, weird, like I don't know what's going on, and then this beautiful, like, oh my God, what? I didn't know shit could be like this, right? And that's this process is like, I got to this place of like fully accepting, like, okay, I thought I knew some things, and I don't know shit, right? Like, but I'm learning a lot, and just fully like just this succession of events where I was like, I didn't know shit could be this good. I forgot. Or it's like a deeper level of things being so good. So, step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And it's funny because I had issues when I came in with, I get hung up on language sometimes, and I didn't like God. I didn't like God as He. Depending on what day it is, I still might be a little like, but it's like the other day I was working stuff with my sponsor, right? And I said He in reference to God, and then I was like, oh no, what have I done? It's like, no, I have this thing to uphold, right? Yeah. And I need that shit. I need to like humble myself, right? I need like that's kind of stuff needs to come up of like tearing down whoever I think that I am, right? To really get true, like to who I am, because that's the place that I'm in today. Is like I want to be vulnerable, and vulnerability. When I look up the definition, is like I'm susceptible to harm, right? It's the literal definition of being vulnerable, right? Like physical, spiritual, emotional, mental harm, right? Like that's, but in this place of spirituality and this process of recovery, to me, what I'm learning is vulnerability means that I'm tearing down all of these walls and all of this protection that I've put up around myself. And that's not to say that I'm vulnerable around everybody, right? I have learned boundaries today, and I have learned to slowly build things with people, and but I've found that the more vulnerable I can be and the more real that I can be, the deeper the connection. And that's that's all I ever wanted, and I didn't know that that's what I wanted, right? Just to be connected, to be felt, to be heard. And it hurt, right, when I came in and my parents were like, we don't believe you anymore. Everything about you just is a lie. I thought I had this great relationship with my mom, and she was just like, that shit is not real, right? You just lied about everything. And I wanted it to be, don't you believe me? Now I'm honest. It's right? And I had to build that back, right? And that trust, and that's what I'm learning in this process with my higher power, right? Is like, I'm learning to trust slowly as well. And it's crazy. It's like I want people to trust me immediately, but I'm not ready to trust my higher power like that, right?
Yeah.
who am I? What, but we couldn't just allow things to happen. We were always on the lookout for ways we could force things to go as we wanted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's been me lately, right? It's like there'll be these sneaky ways where I think that I'm living in the solution, and I am in a lot of ways. And then when I pause and I really look at it, I'm holding on. I literally had shit mapped out, like first this, then this, then this, like this whole little succession. And I've just had to throw that shit away, right? Because that's not how it's going to happen. Like learning that I can do the footwork, because that's one thing that the first time around through the steps, I had this different idea about, turning my will and my life over to the care of God. I thought that meant I was giving up my free will, right? I thought I was giving up my power. I had no say in the matter, right? And it says step 3 doesn't free us from having to take action, but it does liberate us from excessive worry about the results.
Mm-hmm.
We are responsible for our recovery.
Mm-hmm.
With each setback, we are given a new opportunity to renew our commitment to live by spiritual principles.
Mm-hmm.
I am responsible for my recovery. I am responsible for all the work. I love that. Like, it works if you work it. And when I heard that, now I feel that. I feel that so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get what I put out of it. And it's not so much like, oh, I get happiness and I get joy when I put into it, right? I get something different. I might be in pain and maybe I get some peace.
Yeah.
Or I get some relief, right? Or I might be excessively, overly joyous and excited, and I just get to just chill, right? I get what I need, not what I want a lot of times, right? And thank God it's not me doing this, Thank God it's me and it's not me, right? I'm doing the footwork, and today I'm learning to let go of the results, and I lose sight of that sometimes, right? Where does it come in where I'm taking these actions and I'm doing the footwork, but I just gotta let the shit go, right? Even if I can have an expectation. Well, last time I did this, and this is what happened. It's not last time, right? So, yeah, my sick ways of thinking find new ways to show up, right? Because as my recovery grows and changes and evolves, I believe that, that's what my disease is doing too, right? Finding new ways to show up in seemingly a healthy way, right? Like I said, I'm so in tune and I'm listening to shit. I'm not listening to shit. I'm not really seeing, right? Or I'm only seeing at this level of the tools that I have, and I can only see, right, with vision of the experience that I have and the tools that I have. So how can I see into that new growth when I'm not there yet? My faith in this process grows because of the results that I've experienced, right? Early on, it was just kind of like I don't want to say like a blind leap of faith, but just kind of trusting that things could be different, that I had seen it be different for other people. And now I'm one of those other people, right, that I first came in and I saw that I don't know how, but I want that, right? And now I know how it works. And there's this thing in the beginning that talks about, in the introduction, and it's funny because I'll go back and read this stuff and I'll be like, did I ever read the introduction? It's like the foreword in a book where I'm like, I'm not reading that shit, right?
Right.
But it says to carry the message, to carry the message to the still suffering addict, that one purpose, clear and powerful, stands alone, and our collective consciousness as the only thing that really matters. With that, all is possible and miracles happen. That's how I got the message, right? It's a gift. Other people gave it to me, what was so freely given to them, and I have a hard time accepting gifts. Historically, right? Where I'm like, why me? I'm I'm not deserving, I'm not that. It's a fucking gift,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nobody asked me like, well, I want to give you this, but I need to know who you really are or what you've done to deserve. Like nobody asked me that. I want to know what you've done to deserve this. I want to know if like no, it's a gift, right? And if I feel so strongly and so compelled of like, man, this is so amazing. Oh my God, I don't deserve this. This is too much. It's like somebody gives you a gift and you're like, oh, you spent too much on this. Oh, this is too much, right? It's like, okay, well, it's a gift. Like, I don't get to decide, right? I can choose to accept it or not, right? And today I choose to accept the gifts that I'm given. And the only thing I know to do is just to give it back, right? Today I look at how am I being of service, and I'm just so grateful for this process. It's like my gratitude speaks when I care and I share it again anyway, right? I'm kind of at a loss, because it's like sometimes I feel really moved, and that's why I pull on the literature a lot today, especially right where I'm getting back in this process of like I don't know shit, right? I'm just learning, but I'm grateful to be here, and I love y'all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Next, I introduce Tanya J.
Hi, family. My name is. Go ahead. You want to clap?
Yeah.
Hi, family. I'm Tanya J. I'm a blessed recovering addict.
What's up, Tanya?
And it is truly an honor and a privilege anytime Narcotics Anonymous or anyone asks you to share your experience, strength, and hope. And I want to tell you, I don't take that lightly. I understand why I'm here. Because of my own inability to accept personal responsibility, I made a mess of my life. Yeah. At 25 years old, I came to Narcotics Anonymous. I was a college graduate. I had my own place. And I walked into Narcotics Anonymous and nobody was here but a bunch of dope fiends. And they had them big hands. And some of them still had pus coming out of their hands. And I was like, how did I get here at 25? I had allowed this little thing, this little substance to control my life to the point that I had to come and sit in a room with a bunch of dope fiends with, those big hands. And sometimes when I tell my story, the dope fiends be like, why do you always got to talk about us with the big hands? Because it was frightening. Yeah. I was just a crackhead. But I lost my way. Yeah. And I couldn't find my way back to the yellow brick road. And it took them dope fiends to help me to get my life together. And I remember when I first came there, I was sitting inside the meeting, and I would listen to their stories because I couldn't identify. I don't come from a broken home. My parents have been married for over 59 years, still married. I have 9 siblings. There's only 3 areas we go in. Either it's law enforcement, military, or criminal. Those are only 3 categories in my family. When I got here, and prior to coming here, I understand that my first sponsors was my parents. Yeah. And they wanted the best for me. They never said, Tanya, when you grow up, I hope you become a crack addict. My parents wanted the best. And I realized that I lost my way. And Narcotics Anonymous helped me to find my way back. I remember going into the meetings. I come from New York City. I've been in Atlanta for over 20 years. My father was born in Augusta, Georgia, and we came down here. I guess that's that other part where we reconnect with the family, and we came to my father's hometown, but I'm a native New Yorker, born and bred. And when I came down here, just like in New York, like the recovery was still basically the same. Yeah. Our message was hope. Our promise was freedom, that any addict can stop using, that you can lose that desire to use, and you can find a new way to live. And I don't care, I travel all around Narcotics Anonymous. I've been to Africa, Alaska, I've been all over speaking for Narcotics Anonymous, and I'll tell you that the recovery is still the same. I remember I was speaking at the World, and I was standing up there on the podium, and I was sharing because I thought that, becoming an addict was just a black thing because I came from the inner city. And as I was sharing about that, a guy from Russia walked past the stage, and he said, "No, we smoke crack in Russia too." I said, "Well, all righty then." And what I realized is that, we're more similar than we are different. See, my story may not be your story, but it's important that you tell your story. Because somebody's going to identify. If it wasn't for them dope fiends to talk about that deep, dark, nasty, raunchy shit, and back then they were talking. See, y'all don't talk too much now. Everybody all right? Right? But back then they would give it up. You know why they gave it up? Because their life was on the line. And I think sometimes we forget that our life is on the line. Like the gift of desperation is no longer here. Because guess what? It's available to us all now. See, I remember a time when it wasn't available. I remember when we had to go in the basements and go to different meetings because it wasn't cool being an addict. Yeah. Now we got it on TV. Everybody got an addict in their family. And it's not a secret anymore. Because anybody can fall on hardship, right? But there was a time, like, you didn't talk about that. Right? We didn't talk about that. And even till today, we gotta be very careful because sometimes we think that the war is over. And the war is not over. I don't know about you, but I have a disease that want to kill me. 29 years later, close to 29, on Tuesday, which is my birthday, Tuesday, February 25th, 1991, I got clean. Yeah. And I've been sitting in these seats for over 29 years. And if you see me most of the time, I sit on the front row. I still sit on the front row. Because I have a disease that still wants to get me. And now that I'm retired and, I did everything, I got the house, I got the husband, got the divorce, got the, I got the degrees, I came in with a degree, got additional degrees, I retired and all that other stuff. And now, it's not the struggle anymore. See, I got clean because I didn't want to be a bum. That's why I got clean, because I seen people eating out of garbage cans and all that. And my mother said to me, she said, "Look, I don't know what you're doing out there, but so-and-so facility called. They said they have a bed for you, and I think you better go. Because whatever you're doing, you can't do it here." And I stayed clean for 5 years through that therapeutic community, right? But back then, they felt that if they just get us a job and, just things like that and get the services put in place, that you would be okay. And of course, for 5 years, and back then, they gave us drinking privileges. They don't do that shit no more, But after 5 years of social acceptability and things like that, and drinking wasn't my thing, but I took a drink, right? And my disease said, "Now, bitch, you are not no alcoholic. Why don't you stop playing, and why don't you just do what we really want to do?" Right? And the reason why is because when I was out there using, right, like I couldn't do it in my house. I went to your house. You know who y'all are. I smoked in your house. My mother said, "I wouldn't care if you pass out, fall out, you will not get high in our house." And then my father worked at night, my mother worked in the day, so we had 24-hour security. So I had to go to y'all houses, and y'all told me how to twist it, turn it, and all that other stuff. And I always had, that reservation, right? Because when I get my own place, I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it. Right? And the reason why I share that is because reservations will rob you of the benefit that this program has to offer you. And a lot of times we don't talk about the what if and when this happened. And I don't know about you, but I'm a part of the no matter what club. Like no matter what, I can never use again. Now there's a possibility we all can say, if you want to use, you can use. Because we can't grasp new ideas on a closed mind. First Step talks about we could be beaten, stomped, choked, threatened, thrown out a window. And if you don't believe me, just go to a meeting and let somebody sit there and let the discussion leader talk, and they tell their story. You be sitting up there saying, what the fuck is wrong with you? When you sit in those meetings, you get to hear the lengths that we will go to use. And so every time somebody shares in a meeting, right, really what they're doing with us is they're doing a fourth step. We shouldn't take that lightly. I don't. So I'll come in a meeting and I'll sit up there and I need to know. Because my disease will tell me, because my ass ain't smelling no more, like I'm okay. Now you got those $300,000 worth of credit cards, all you gotta do is put the PIN number. Oh, you could really get high now. I remember in Boston in my 23rd year, I was up in Boston, I was speaking at their convention. It's about 5,000 people there, and I was getting ready to go up on stage, and you could hear the chant, and you could hear the crowd, and all that other stuff. And as I was walking up on the stage, my disease said, I want to rock right now. And I played off, I make a joke, I said, oh, you rock bass and you came to get down? Okay. That's a black joke. So I sat up there, and my disease had attacked me in Narcotics Anonymous. It said, now listen, I want you to share, because them people done paid a lot of money for you to come. And when you get finished sharing, we got a nice way of closing. See, we're never safe. And it wasn't because I don't have a sponsor. It's not because I don't share about where I'm at. It's not because I don't do service work. Everybody knows I do service work. I go to Narcotics Anonymous all over. It's not because I don't do step work. I have a sponsor that has a sponsor that has a sponsor. Our sponsorship family is connected to the other fellowship. That's how deep our sponsorship go. And in Atlanta, we have what they call a tree. We have one of the largest trees down here. But even with having all those arsenal, the disease said, let's get high. And so I've come to understand that it's not over. It's not over until my eyes close and I cease to breathe. Then I can tell y'all I beat addiction. But as long as I'm breathing, my disease ain't outside, my disease is right here. It's getting information like I'm getting it. And it's trying to find easier, softer ways. And so my disease don't come out and say, Tanya, let's get high. It'll come out through a little Hostess cupcake. Right. Little Debbie. Right. It'll come out in the credit cards. It'll come out in him, in her, or whatever it is, right? That's how cunning, baffling the city is, because you think it's going to come that way. But one of the things that I had to realize is that I had to get honest. I'm so grateful now. Listen, I was here before that book came. So with all these spiritual principles and faith and love and trust, and we didn't have those. What we knew is that the 12 steps are the how. And if you go through the 12 steps, you will see that H-O-W, 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 H-O-W. That's how it worked for us. I had to get honest in the first step. I had to become open-minded in the second. And I had to become willing in the third. Yeah. So the honesty, the H, step one. I had to admit that I was powerless and my life was unmanageable. It had to be. I was sitting in a room with a bunch of dope fiends at 25 years old that had those big hands with pus coming out of it. People who got their shit together don't come to Narcotics Anonymous. Yeah. Fucked up people do. So if you're sitting in here, I know you're fucked up too. And that's the way sometimes you gotta look at it. People, all the time I see people, right? And they be like, oh my God, that's my coworker. Let them come in. Come on. Yeah. All right? Because you're as sick as your secrets. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in honesty, I had to admit that you know what? I have a major problem with drugs, and if I keep denying that I did, my life is going to become unmanageable. And that's even till today. Like if I still think that now, you know, because it's been a long time for me, right? And if I think that I'm okay, because now don't think that sometimes my disease don't say, you don't gotta go to them meetings no more.
Yeah.
It'll find ways. It like, oh, he's sharing, she's sharing. Oh, don't listen to them because you know they lying, they still tricking, they still hoeing. You know how the disease have you dissect other people, right? But what I learned through my sponsor was that, and being honest, the only thing that we have to identify is with the pain. And that's how I identify with each and every one of y'all. I know that if you're sitting in here today, that whatever got you here was painful enough for you to sit in these seats. And that's all that matters to me. We don't give a fuck who your connections was. I don't care if you were Tony Montana. We don't care how much or how little you got. All we care about is your problem and how we can help. There's no big eyes, there's no little U's. There's no difference between the old timer and the newcomer, except the old timer, we've been coming here and we know how sick we are. And for the newcomer, y'all asses got to keep coming to find out how fucking sick you are. And that's the only thing that makes a difference. And then I had to get honest with where I was and who I was with and why I was here. Like, Tanya, why are you here? Like, are you here to get a husband, boyfriend? Are you here to get better? Did you forget why you came here?
Come on.
Did you come here because you needed a job? I came in with a job, and I retired from that same job, but in another branch. But I retired. One job, one agency. And I had to get honest that, Tanya, if you don't get it together, you're going to lose it all. And then I had to become open-minded. And you know, one of the things I always talk about open-mindedness, because sometimes when I go to certain areas, right, there's a division. Yeah. And we could play like there's no division in Georgia, but it is. But one of the things, I am so grateful for them dope fiends that were there when I got there. Because in New York, we don't give a shit.
That's right.
We was sitting there, let me tell you something, we used to, and there's a place, it's closed now. I used to, now I'm forgetting the name because I'm still thinking about the Highland Club down here. That's y'all highlight. It was called St. Mark's, right? And it was a place where we had our meetings at, right? And it was right in the village. So back then it was like punk rock time. You would see people with half clothes on, no clothes, bums. Like we used to sit with each other, and I'm talking about the addict that's just coming off the street, that's stinking, and because your ass ain't smelling no more, right? And now here's the true addict who's found their way to a meeting. And we would get up and we would get them a cup of coffee.
Yes. Right.
They couldn't hold the coffee, they were shaking. Yeah. They would be sleeping on the floor. They would be smelling. And we sat right next to them. Because there, but for the grace of God, go I. And some of us forget that. See, it talks about in our literature that the addict today is going to be more fortunate. And they are. So some of them are driving up in their cars. I was more fortunate than the dope fiend. I don't know nothing about homelessness. I don't know nothing about eating out of the garbage can. I came in here with both my parents. I still have them to the day. Now they do say to me, I'll be trying to get them to come to my anniversary. The next one they're gonna come, they're gonna wait till I get 30 years. Because they said, look, we tired of coming to these meetings. You know? And then they be like, do y'all ever grow up? Do y'all ever get better? Because we talk about the same old thing. Yeah. And then my parents said, wait, let me get this. So you get on a plane and you travel to another state to go sit in meetings all weekend, to drink coffee, and to let people tell y'all horrific stories, right? Yes. And you do this all over the world? Absolutely. And we enjoy it. That's right. Because there's no greater love. I have met some of the most phenomenal people in Narcotics. I've gone to the mountains. I've gone to Indian reservations. I've gone to other countries. I've seen real lions, real zebras, right? I've gone all over. I've seen a whale. Went to Alaska. I've seen a whale go up and come on down, right? I've sat in teepees. It doesn't matter. I've gone all the way in the backwoods And I be saying, all right now. Because, I be watching them scary movies, right? Wrong turn. Lord, please don't let this be the wrong turn. And don't let me be the invited guest, right? They be inviting me. I be like, oh, Lord, right? But wherever I go, I always get a message of hope. I met my girl, Heather. Heather's in the room, and I met her at the Alabama convention. I told her about GRCNA. Right? She's from Canada. And I said, listen, Georgia got a convention. You got to come and check out. And let me tell you something. I go to all the conventions in Georgia. I go to WENA. I go to MACNA. I go to Piedmont. I go to GRCNA. Because guess what? I didn't get high in one place. I got high all over. You understand? And so when you only hanging out with the same people, you're getting very limited information. And for me, right, I was a diverse addict. I got high with everybody, right? And so to come in here, like, I'm so grateful that my predecessors told me, right? Because we were all we had back then. And see, what happens is that we have so many meetings now. And yes, we do have choices. We have choices. Sometimes those choices limit us too. Because before, you had to get along with somebody, right? You and him get into a fight today or argument today, and both of y'all say, you sitting next to your sponsor, they sitting next to their sponsor. And I'm going to tell you something, back then, them sponsors didn't play with us. They was like, look, you two idiots won't be fucking up our meetings. Hug each other. Matter of fact, go give him some coffee. I'm talking about those people knowing that we were all we had. Yeah. And sometimes we think that we got all day to get our shit together. We come in here because we have a major problem with drugs. Unlike many other people, we have a solution. Yeah. It's called the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 concepts. And we can apply any of that in all of our affairs. And so I had to become open-minded to the possibilities that maybe these dope fiends could help me. Yeah. And my first sponsor, I always tell the story, my first sponsor was a black woman, right? She was quiet, and I liked her because, quiet people to me always remind me of sneaky people, right? But one thing about a quiet person, they could hold your shit, right? And when you're doing dirt, you want somebody to hold your stuff, right? And so I liked her, and I picked her because, I was loud, right? And she was like quiet, and I remember one day we were talking, and I was talking, and I smelled her breath, and was you drinking? She said, yeah. I said, well, you can't be my sponsor anymore. She said, I know. And see, back then, they gave us our sponsors. See, y'all luxury, y'all get to get picked. And I heard somebody last night, and it kind of disturbed me a little bit. When they said, and if you don't like this sponsor, you just go on and get another one. Like, we're not expendable. Come on. And let me tell you something. I sponsor a lot of women, but one of the things I tell them before I sponsor them, I said, before you move on with me, first of all, I want to know why you leaving your sponsor. That's first of all. Second of all, once I find out, I said, well, what I need for you to do, because we can't make nobody stay with nobody. But what you do owe that person is the respect to go to them and say, I'm moving on. I'd like to thank you for your service. And the reason why I say that is because we're all broken people. And sometimes Narcotics Anonymous is the most estimable things that we can do. It's an honor to sponsor people. Yeah. And it's very painful when they have to move on or they leave. And so in order for that person to grow in their recovery, it's important that you get honest with them and tell them why maybe I feel that you can't sponsor me because, you talk too much. And I find that you talk, I've heard them say that to each other. You talk too much and you tell my business in front of your other friends, and I don't appreciate that. So now that person knows that maybe they need to sometimes be aware of what they say, because sometimes people don't know. And so when you work a program and you work a rigorous program yourself, right, you got to get honest. You got to be open-minded to the possibility that in order for you to change and transform, right, that there's going to be some things that people are going to say to you that's not too good and not to make you too, you're not too proud of. But we have a responsibility in this program because at the end of the day, like, our life is on the line. And so I remember getting a second sponsor, right? And then my second sponsor was this white woman. She was a dope fiend from the Lower East Side. Her name was Susan T. And she used to talk like, hey, baby, how you doing, right? And I loved her. And she was in the other fellowship, and then she crossed over to NA when NA came, to whatever. And I remember when she became, and what I was impressed with was her clean time. Like, I think by that time, she had maybe about 10 years in her recovery. And that was a lot of time. He was like, oh, mighty ISIS, things like that. And she joined my home group on Friday. She said, this is the group that me and you are going to meet at on Fridays. And she joined that particular home group. And I remember doing step work with her. And I remember God saying to me, my third step experience was that I wanted to get better. I wasn't using drugs anymore, but I noticed that there was some things in my behavior. Now, I want to tell you that I wasn't an act out when I came in Narcotics Anonymous. And first of all, and second of all, them dope fiends didn't give us, like, you know how we give y'all the boat, the helicopter, and the plane, everything to get your shit together? Them dope fiends didn't play with us. They was like, look, sit down, shut up. Don't fuck up our meetings. Look, because they were fighting for their lives. They knew why they were there. Us crackheads, we came in, we like, and I think that's why they started talking about shut the fuck up. Because we'd be like, well, we couldn't. Y'all gave us coffee. The worst thing you can give a crackhead is coffee. But in that process, I remember talking with my sponsor. And I remember me telling God, because I had been here. And when I got here, they did not make us go to the steps when we first got here. The first year was what they called the gift year. All they wanted us to do was just to learn the language. They wanted us to make meetings, right? And it was beginner meetings. And they made us do that for 90 days. And that's so that you could get our language down, because y'all like fucking up our language, right? And so the first 90 days, they were called beginners meetings. And then during that time, the people who were our predecessors, right, the people who came before us, they couldn't keep what they have, right? So they had to give it away. So they would come back to the beginners meeting and tell us what life has been like for them. And as a direct result of that, right, it was based on attraction. And if you wanted what they had, which we did, because you know how we get, oh, I want that chain. Oh, I want that man, whatever, right? You had to do what they do, right? And so after 90 days, you decided that you was an addict. Because it talks about, it's not automatic. Admission is not automatic. Yeah. People think it's you down when you say you down, but admission comes when you say, hi, I'm Tanya, and I'm an addict. Right. Then I identify with you, right? And so we got to be real, real careful, because we have a whole lot of open meetings, and I don't understand, because sometimes y'all be sharing an open meeting, 4 steps and stuff. Anyone may join us, and you may say you're not under surveillance, but I'm going to tell you something. I worked for an agency, and I'm telling you, you are under surveillance. Like everybody's not going to understand why you fucked the dog. Now, we'll understand, because you were sick at the time, right? So you say, right? But everybody's not going to understand that. Yeah. And so when we start disclosing things in open meetings where everybody can join us, so we didn't do that back then. There were meetings that were called closed meetings, and those meetings was for addicts and addicts only. The only people that came that wasn't addicts was your children, because people had to bring their kids. But we didn't bring our boyfriend, we didn't bring our girlfriend to sit in the meeting and look at the junkies. We don't do that. That's why we have anniversaries. That's the only time we really should be having people in our meetings, right? It's for them to see what, because it's based on attraction and stuff like that. But once we're inside those meetings, right, because that's where the work did. That's where we did the work, in them closed meetings, right? And we would tell things, and you'd be like, I'm coming back next week. I want to see if she got caught with that dude she was messing with, right? It was like a soap opera then, right? So I remember in the third step, God speaking to me, because I wanted to get better, like I said. And I realized that I was clean for some time. And back then, our sponsors busted us out, right? The first year, remember I told you the first year is the gift. So the first year, they say something nice about you, right? And so sometimes they will bust you out right then and there. They be like, all right, clean and crazy, right? Now maybe you'll get into the steps and you'll be like, so you knew that your next anniversary was coming up and you didn't want them to embarrass you, so you did the work, right? Now we give y'all the boat, the helicopter, the plane. We tell you you do it whenever you want to do it. And the reality is, when do you want to get better?
Come on.
Why come to a 12-step program and don't work? The 12 steps is beyond me. And I don't care what you say. Most of us are here because of some harm that was done to us too. And at the end of the day, you're sitting on the gold mine. You're sitting on the solutions, and you still won't go to the steps to free other people. See, in order to carry a message, you got to get a message. And let me say something. God ain't going to use no dressed up God. He's not going to allow your unspiritual ass to do spiritual things in this awesome program. And so we got to get our shit together. We got to get our shit together. So I know we're talking about the how, 1, 2, 3, but I got to bring this in with my sponsor. I remember going crying out to God because I said, God, I'm clean and I'm still causing harm. You know, just things. I was intolerant of men. I've been a victim of rape, and I was raped at 10 years old. He put his penis in my mouth, in my ass, and in my vagina. And that was not the story that I grew up on. What happened to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the handsome prince that's going to come and save the damsel in distress? What about Cinderella? You know, when he comes and he kisses you, and all of a sudden he takes you and he has you go to a palace. Like, what happened? That wasn't my story. My first introduction to sex was through a rape. I couldn't have that story. So I created a story. And even though I caught him a year later and he went to jail, I thought I resolved that. I didn't know that I had an inability. I didn't attach to men. I stuck them up. And it's so funny because when I go back to where I live, now here it is 29 years later, right? Really 30-something years later, right? I go back, they still remind me about when I used to stick guys up. They still, they don't let you get past that jacket. Yeah, I remember when you stuck me up, Now let me try that shit today. It ain't gonna work. That's why I stay, right? And I work on that disease. But in dealing with the sponsor that I had, we talk about the decision. The third step tells me, because I'm at a crossroad. Either I can keep going on to this bitter end, even in here. And if I keep it up, it's going to lay me in jails, institutions, or I'm going to die. And it's not necessary in that order. And no, everybody don't go back to using drugs. But how many people do we know that have killed themselves in Narcotics Anonymous clean? It's because the work. How many of us have gone to jail clean? Something in our program, not doing the work. And so God said, I told God that the only way that I would do this work, because he told me, he said, I need for you to tell this white woman about who you are. I said, I ain't telling that white woman my black business. You kidding me? He said, yeah, I want you to tell her, because she's going to help you. So I had to make a decision. I had to trust this God. I'm talking about this force. And our literature talks about a force that was working in my life way before I met y'all. I'm talking about a force that pulled me from the muck and mire and lifted me and gave me a last sense of hope, because this was the last house on the block. And God said, you can get with this or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. Right. And I chose to come here. And in that decision, God said, I need you to trust her, and I need you to tell her everything that happened in your life. So the 4 steps allows us to go and talk about everything, right? That's why the 4 steps, we could talk about everything, why you think you got high, and because, that's our thing, just throw up, right? Who you think did it, and why you think you became an addict. God said, I want you to do it. And I said, God, I only do it under one circumstance. Promise me that if I tell that, promise me you're going to go get that bastard that raped me at 10. One of the things that I find very common with a lot of women that come to recovery is either issues with incest, rape, victims of sexual abuse, right? And at the end of the day, if you keep coming, you find if men get, now back then they got honest. They talked about sucking on things that they had no business sucking on too. And sometimes we don't allow people the freedom to come in here and to do the work that they need. And so what we do is we get with our sponsors and we tell all those secrets to the sponsor. But let me just say that a sponsor is another recovering addict that is subject to fail you at any time. So you keep running around and just telling your goddamn sponsor or your business and you don't let us know. And really, to tell you the truth, that's unspiritual too. Now you're going to say, Tanya, why is that unspiritual? It's unspiritual because when you came into the meeting, somebody sat before you and told you their story. How dare you come in here and don't let us know who you are? What is so unique about your story? Do you know that there's an addict waiting to hear your story? A lot of times you'll hear people talk about, oh, I prostituted, I hold. That's not in my story. And I don't create a story. You know, I came from both parents. I came from good stock. But if it ain't talking about the girl with the black feet and the run-over shoes and all that, and we can't deny people their story. So I need for you to tell your story. Because for everybody in here, there's a reason why you used. And somebody's gonna, I don't know about you, but it's the identification that keeps us going. So God told me I needed you to go talk to this white woman and I need you to tell her everything that happened in your life. I said, everything? He said, everything. Don't you leave nothing out. And I wrote, and back then they had those composition notebooks. And they had the little red line over here. And so while I was sitting there, right then we did the 4th, 5th, and 6th step. When I sat there with my sponsor, we were sitting there and I wrote about everything that happened. And while I was sitting there, now I had to tell her about it, right? And I went to her house, and you know the dope fiends, they didn't have what we had, right? Because they had all them felonies and they didn't get good jobs. But the one thing she had was love. And when she invited me to her house, right? And that's another thing. That was one of the greatest gifts that you could have. When a dope fiend allowed you to come into their house. When people allow you to come into you junkie, allow you to come inside their house, man, it is an honor. Because they don't know who you are. That's why we took your asses to the coffee shop. We got to find out who you are. But you be stealing our shit, right? And I remember talking to her, right? And I remember she making me some coffee, and I'm getting ready to do the 4th step, and she said, Tanya, what's the matter? Because I was uneased. She said, Tanya, what's the matter? I didn't want to tell her. She said, Tanya, what's the matter? I said, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt you. See, it talks about in our literature how Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and how, you know, Dr. Jekyll leaves and Mr. Hyde takes over, and we turn into these monsters. We believe we're these great big monsters. Like, I didn't come in here because I was a nice addict. I was a greasy, grimy, sleazy, slimy. Now listen, I was articulate. So the guys didn't think I was like the girl that stood on the corner, but I was just as deadly. I would wait till they get where they going, click, clock, there go the Glock. And before you know, he'd be standing there pissing on himself because most of them were married. And he ain't gonna say anything. I remember creating fear in men. And that's not a good thing to do. And I remember going to the sponsor and we getting ready to do this thing, and I told her I was afraid. And she said, what are you afraid of? I said, I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt you. Because I thought there was something in my addict behavior. I was 5'9", I was about 50 pounds light, I'm a black girl, and you know, I didn't hang with white people. Where we came from, we only robbed y'all when y'all came to the projects to buy drugs. And I was afraid that there was something that I was going to do in my addict behavior to destroy this awesome relationship that I had with this woman. And she said, you hurt me? I was like, yeah, me hurt you. She said, okay. So she gave me some coffee and she stood it up. She went in her room. She came back with this big old hat box. She put the hat box on the table, and then she pulled this big manuscript out and she told me to read it. And I read it. And when I read it, I was just sitting there and my mouth started opening, and I read more and it's opening. It was a 51-page, it was my sponsor's 51-page manuscript. My sponsor had been arrested over 51 times. She was a violent predicate felon from New York City. And I was sitting there saying, oh shit, oh shit. And all I kept saying is that, oh shit, this bitch know where I live, right? And then she said to me, she said, so you worried about hurting me? And I was like, no. She said, well, do you want to get caught on my whiteness or do you want to get into the steps?
Ooh.
That woman guided me for 10 years, and then I came down here to Georgia. She was dying. I will tell you, I have an awesome sponsor now that reminds me so much of her. Just loving, caring, but no nonsense. And that's the kind of sponsor I need because I'm an intellectual addict. I will intellectualize shit. I use words that pontificate to the highest level. And I need somebody that's not impressed with my degrees. My education, you be like, all right, with that bullshit. Anyway, stop talking to your ex-husband like that. Stop doing this, stop doing that. That's what I needed. And so this woman guided me, I told you, and she helped me to get my life together. And what I charge in this thing when we talk about honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, right? You got to get honest about where you at. You know, when I date sometimes, right, I've been dating the kind of guys in recovery a little bit, right? And you know what I do? I ask them, what step you on? I had two things. I ain't do the steps. Goodbye. Because I can't dressed up garbage can. But at the end of the day, well, you come into the emergency room. My father used to tell me when I was growing up, he said, why don't you go sit in the emergency room and catch one of them doctors coming through, or go to the law library, catch a lawyer, right? I come to Narcotics Anonymous and catch an addict. But anyway, the joy is in the journey. And a lot of people get frightened by the steps. The steps are going to be the greatest experience. Let me tell you, I keep doing the steps over and over and over, and we got even more literature. We got another thing coming out, because they know we sick, because now they coming out with that spiritual whatever. And at the end of the day, like when I stay in the how, right? The other books are very good. But when I stay in the how, and I'll say this in closing, if you ever get an opportunity, and it's still Narcotics Anonymous and it's still Georgia, they're getting ready to do the Superfest where the addicts that are, I'm talking about predecessors, 45, 50 years, right? And the minimum speaker is 30 years. I go there to get refueled. I don't always want to be the smartest one in the room, right? Or the brightest crayon in the box. And so sometimes I go to these places so that I could just sit there and just soak in the knowledge. And I don't care even if you don't stay for the whole weekend, just go and listen to them. And you'll find that even with time, because you be thinking that, damn, I just got 2 years, I just got 9 days, I got this, and I'm still going through. And you find that they still struggle too. Right. There's no difference. There's no difference. Our pain is no different. You know, today, like the young lady said, Sarah did an awesome job. Yeah. Sarah, I was just sitting there in awe. And the reason why I wanted Sarah to go first, because sometimes people get enamored by the time that they miss the quality of the message.
Ooh, that's right.
And so I needed to hear you. I felt your honesty. I felt your truth, right? And it helped me to look at some things, you know? And that's what I'm going to do this whole convention. I came here, I got my little room, I didn't bring no sponsees, no nothing, because I didn't want to. I just wanted to get with y'all. And every time I come to Gretna, right,